It'll take time to restore chaos.
So I'm not the most dedicated consumer of manga out there, most that I physically own being related to some other property that I'm interested in, like It Invaded #BreakBroken, which is a sequel to the original anime, or works that I became a fan of through anime, like Attack on Titan or My Hero Academia, and even then, I only own specific volumes, the final volume of AOT for sentimental value, and the My Villain Academia arc volumes of MHA, because it's the only good. For years, the only exception to this has been the work of Tetsumu Nihei, who is one of my favourite mangaka out there, but recently another has joined him. I am of course talking about Takeru Hokuzono and his work, Kagurabachi.
Formulate strategies, fuck random battling. All that I do, yeah, I do for a cause. You'll save a rattling, man, it's so maddening. All this bad karma is giving me pause. You make a victim, you really a villain. Random act of violence, you really a whore. Though I'm not like you, I do understand you. Random act of kindness, you die by the sword.
Ever since I saw this random, out-of-context panel of Sojo confessing his love for Chihiro's dad, I've been balls deep in Kagurabachi. I was vaguely aware of the memes leading up to its release, but it was specifically seeing this page on my timeline that made me want to dive in, and at this point, over 2.5 years in, I'm still ride or die. I've kept up to date with the manga, I own most of the volumes, at least the ones that have been officially published in English, and of course I made a 40+ minute video analysing basically every single aspect of the manga, which came with its own soundtrack, swords and synthesizers. I am a Kagurabachi stan, and that is for a variety of different reasons. Of course, you have the great artwork, character design and paneling, but what really made me fall for Kagurabachi is its character writing and themes, specifically its themes of revenge, guilt and responsibility. For the first 2 arcs, the series mostly focuses on these themes on a small-ish scale, largely dealing with Chihiro's struggle to reconcile his love and admiration for the good man he knew his father to be, and the inherent sin and evil he committed by virtue of creating weapons as destructive as the enchanted blades. But as the series goes on, we start to broaden the scope of the story and setting, and thus those questions begin to apply on a much larger scale as we begin digging into the lore of the Sentai War and start talking about war crimes, national hero worship, reparations and genocide. This all comes to a head in the 3rd arc, the Swordbearer Assassination arc, which sees the series' antagonists, the Hishaku, launching attacks on the surviving enchanted blade wielders so they can have the blades for themselves, assisted by Samura, one of the enchanted blade users. Samura, it turns out, is also trying to kill the old blade users, with the aim of destroying the swords himself out of a sense of responsibility and guilt for the crimes that he himself and the others committed during the Sentai War, which we aren't really told too much about at this point in the story. We don't even know who Japan was fighting against, but it's implied that Samura and his crew, based on the way that he moves and acts, got up to some heinous shit during the war, enough so that he is willing to temporarily work with the Hishaku to bring the truth of their crimes to light and make things right. This is an extremely messy, nuanced and difficult conversation to have in any series, let alone a Japanese one, and I was really excited to see how it would unfold. After all, so far I'd had no reason to doubt that it would wholeheartedly embrace that awful, sticky nuance. However, as the series has gone on, I have noticed some cracks in what was previously a rock-solid foundation. The first big issue I noticed with Kagurabachi around this time was the pacing. Kagurabachi has always moved at a pretty fast pace, but it worked with the first 2 arcs since those put together basically act as one long extended introduction to the characters and the world, and by the end of the Rakuzachi arc, it feels like we have a basic grasp of our major players, the present state of affairs, and a general direction for where the rest of the story story is going to go. And after having these two extremely intense, high-octane arcs back to back, I expected that the next arc would slow down a little to allow us to catch our breath, explore our characters and their dynamic more, learn more about the history and politics of never fucking mind, the Hishaku are coming and they're gonna kill us all, strap up Chihiro, we're going on another murder spree. And this has basically been the deal every time an arc ends. I think we're going to take some time to finally breathe, catch up with things, reflect on the events that just happened, but before I can even finish inhaling, the story has already moved on to the next plot point. Now, I'm aware that Kagurabachi is a shonen action series. Obviously the cool fights are going to be one of the big, if not the biggest priority, but without great characters and world building you can invest in, those fights eventually risk devolving into just petty noise, and I've fallen off this type of story before because eventually characters and story will just devolve into vehicles to get us to the next fight scene. Cool, satisfying and well developed fights only reach their peak when they involve cool, satisfying and well developed characters, and Kagurabachi has those characters, but I fear them getting lost in the never ending conga line of combat, a fear that isn't helped by the series' habit of abruptly benching characters and then going on like they never even existed, even in situations where it's weirder that they aren't there. Hinao, fine, she's a non-combatant, kind of a neutral third party in some ways, makes sense that she doesn't always show up. Char is a literal child, but her healing powers would make her very useful, especially if Chihiro is, I don't know, on the verge of death. And Hiyuki, my queen, that beautiful burning bitch. I did not give her a whole ass theme song just for her to be benched just as shit is kicking off. Bruh, of course I had to record that just before they drop a chapter confirming that baby Hiyuki no diffs a sovereign nation. I guess ask and ye shall receive. But it's not as big of a deal breaker as I'm making it out to be, for as abrupt and off as some story arcs can start off, inevitably the story is able to wind me back into these things, especially as it is usually pretty economical and good at folding in a lot of those meaningful conversations and emotions into the fights themselves as they are happening. It does seem like it might be a long-term problem, and it has made it a bit more difficult for me to totally get into part 2 like I did those first couple of arcs of part 1, but for now I can just roll with it. But one thing that is a little harder to just roll off is how the series has chosen to handle those themes I was talking about, specifically how it has handled the Sentai War and the character of Akimura Soga. For the first couple of arcs, we know very little about Soga. We don't even get a name, he is just known as the Swordmaster. He only shows up a few times, a couple of panels of him being held in prison here and there, and all we know is that he is the wielder of the most powerful enchanted blade, Magatsumi, and that he used it to do something horrible, even by the standards of the other blade users. And eventually we learn what it is he did, and that is that he, with a power called Malediction, wiped out an entire race of people, all 200,000 inhabitants of the enemy nation, after the war has already ended. I do not like this story decision. In isolation, I think it's great. Soga in theory is a really good antagonist, as he essentially acts as a dark premonition of what Chihiro could become if he lets his lust for revenge and his own personal sense of justice cloud his natural sense of humanity and compassion. And the actual portrayal of the malediction itself is fucking chilling, and the way that it as an event spirals out and affects and gives context to nearly every other character, including the other antagonists like Yura and the rest of the Hishaku, is really compelling and captivating to see. However, by putting so much weight on the Malediction as the main big horror of the Sentai War, it ends up squashing a lot of the cool theming and character work the series had been building up. I saw this Reddit post, hopefully I can find it, I'll put it here if I do, that basically said that Europe essentially, after the end of the war, laundered all of its sins through Hitler, putting all the evil they had ever committed onto him so that when he died, they could basically wash their hands and claim that they were paragons of justice. And the poster was making the point that Kagurabachi was doing the same with Soga. By putting so much emphasis on him as the sole architect behind the Malediction, it almost serves to lessen the supposed crimes of the other 5 swordbearers. And like, why are we having all this talk about national guilt and war crimes and collective responsibility when ultimately all of this was seemingly the fault of one guy? Now, the story does bring up the connection between the contracts, and that if Soga were to die, so would the other sword wielders, which brings with that the implication that they may have allowed the Malediction to happen because they were too scared to attack Soga for fear of killing him and thus themselves, thus sacrificing all the Mikaboshi for their own lives. But no, the story does make it clear they did try and stop him, they just failed to do so, which isn't really a moral failing so much as it is just a physical limitation that they couldn't overcome, and like, you can't blame them for that. Not to mention, the Sentai War from Japan's POV was a defensive war that was started by the royal family of the Mikaboshi, so even their participation in the initial conflict doesn't feel as self-serving as they're making it out to be. This has the effect of making Samura's actions and really his whole character a lot less impactful and even bordering on incoherent at times, because he's talking about all the sin and the guilt that he bears, but he doesn't seem especially more at fault than any other active party in the war on Japan's side. He isn't Dick Cheney, he's a random field officer. Does he bear some responsibility for his role in the lives he's taken? Yes, of course he does, and it makes sense that he would feel some amount of remorse and guilt for that. On paper, his character arc, especially his relationship with his daughter Iori, is a phenomenal one, but it feels like it's been ripped from a completely different draft of the story. It sucks because I feel like there are still seeds of that messy and more complex story where the blame wasn't so cut and dry. There's this moment in the Swordbearer assassination arc where Samura is talking with Uruha, and Samura doesn't want to abandon his men for his own benefit, but Uruha essentially goes, at the end of the day, our lives are more consequential, so it's important for us to survive even at the cost of others. And it feels like a clear dividing line between the two that could have led to Samura eventually turning on them all, and could have resulted from them willingly allowing the deaths of others to keep themselves safe. But no, that's not really what happened though. It's like they wanted the Swordbearers to be morally grey and complex war criminals, but didn't want to give them too much agency in their crimes and risk making the audience not like them as much. And like, you can have likable, good characters do objectively, morally reprehensible things and mine conflict from that. I know you can do that because it's exactly what Fullmetal Alchemist did. A lot of the protagonists in that series are military officers who served in a war that eventually ended in the genocide of a people, and even though many of them could be said to be good people, they still did an awful thing, even if it was under the order of a corrupt, fascist military state. They still had agency in their choice to take the lives of countless innocent people, and the story doesn't pretend they didn't. Right now, Kagurabachi is in a bit of a weird state for me. I'd still say I really like the series. It's probably my favourite ongoing manga right now. I still read each chapter as soon as it drops, and I cannot wait for the anime to start airing next year. But there are cracks and faults starting to show, enough that I can't say I'm enthralled and obsessed with it like I was during those first 2 arcs, where it felt like it just couldn't miss. Now, I hope that the story can still turn all of this around, especially since we are going to get a lot more detail about the Sentai War in this new arc, so we'll have to see where things go from here, and I am seriously rooting for it. I never want a story to fall flat for me, and Kagurabachi has given me so many great, incredible moments and characters, and even if it doesn't pan out exactly how I hope, I'm sure it will give me plenty more along the way.